Little Crow's War. Almost 1,000 miles north of the Navajo country, and at the same time of the white men's great civil war, the Santee Indians were losing their homeland forever. During the 10 years preceding the Civil War, more than 150,000 white settlers pushed into Santee country, thus collapsing the left flank of the once permanent Indian frontier. As the result of two deceptive treaties, the Santees surrendered 9/10 of their land and were crowded into a narrow strip of territory along the Minnesota River. In the summer of 1862, everything seemed to go badly between the Santee and the white men. Most of the animals and wild game was gone from the reservation land, and when the Indians crossed into their old hunting grounds, now claimed by white settlers, there was often trouble. For the second year running, the Indians' crop yields were poor, and many of them had to go to the agency traders to obtain food on credit. The Santee had learned to hate the credit system because they no longer had control over the accounts. Little Crow became very angry with the traders during the summer of 1862. Little Crow was a chief of the Medookintons, as had been his father and grandfather before him. Little Crow had signed both the treaties that tricked his people out of their land and the money promised for the land. He had been to Washington to see the Great Father, President Buchanan. He had exchanged his breechclouts and blankets for trousers and breast-button jackets. He had joined the Episcopal Church, built a house, and started a farm, but during the summer of 1862, Little Crow's delusionment was turned into anger. On the night of August 17th, Little Crow was awakened by the sound of many voices and the noisy entry of several Santees into his sleeping room. He recognized the voice of Shakopee. Something very important, something very bad had happened. Shakopee, Mankato, Medicine Bottle, and Big Eagle had all come, and they said Wabasha would soon arrive for a council. 4 young men of Shakopee's band who were hungry for food had crossed the river that sunny afternoon to hunt in the big woods. By the end of their time there, they left by taking the lives of 3 white men and 2 white women. Little Crow sent messengers upstream to summon the Wahpetons and Sissetons to join in the war. The women were awakened and began to run bullets while the warriors cleaned their guns. Little Crow gave orders to attack the agency early next morning and to kill all traitors. The Santee killed 20 men and captured 10 women and children, emptied the warehouses of provisions, and set the other buildings afire. The remaining 47 inhabitants fled across the river to Fort Ridgely, 13 miles downstream. In the late evening of August 21st, Little Crow and Big Eagle's spirits had just risen. Previously, they've dealt with the problem of low warriors and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, 400 Wahpeton and Sisseton warriors came in from the upper agency and offered to join the Medookintons in the war against the white men. On August 22nd, 150 soldiers and 25 armed civilians defended Fort Ridgely. Sadly, they were defeated. In the late afternoon, Santee leaders called off the attack. The sun was now setting low. Lightning Blanket said, "And after we saw the men on the south and was west driven back by the big guns, and could see Little Crow and his men going to the northwest, we decided to join them and see what to do. After joining them, we supposed we were going back to Little Crow's village for more warriors. Little Crow told us there were no warriors, and discussion followed. They soon decided to go to New Elm to attack. At mid-morning of August 23rd, the Santees attacked New Elm. They streamed out of the woods in bright sunlight, formed an arc across the prairie, and swept toward the town. The citizens of New Ulm were ready for them. After an abortive attack by the young braves on August 19th, The townspeople had built barriers, brought in more weapons, and secured the help of militia from towns down the valley. When the Santees came within a mile and a half of the forward line of the white defenders, the mass of warriors began spreading like a fan. At the same time, they increased their speed and began yelling war cries to frighten the white men. Mankato was the war leader on this day. Little Crow was wounded in the village, and his plan of attack was to envelop the town.
On September 1st, Little Crow decided to make a scout downriver to test the strength of Long Trader Sibley's army. A sub-chief called a war council and proposed that they attack the settlement for plunder. Little Crow was opposed and insisted their only enemies to be the soldiers, but 75 warriors joined the sub-chief, and only 35 loyal followers stayed with Little Crow. On September 5th, runners brought news of a battle a few miles to the southwest. Big Eagle and Mankato had trapped the Long Trader soldiers at Birch Coulee. Sibley's army was soon on the move against Little Crow again. He left a letter for Little Crow and a split stick on the battlefield of Birch Coulee. It read, "If Little Crow has any proposition to make, let him send a half-breed to me, and he shall be protected in and out of camp." Little Crow, of course, did not trust this man who was sharp enough to get away with so much of the Santee's treaty money, but he decided to send a reply. Little Crow sent the reply to General Sibley on September 7th, and it said, "What reason we have commenced this war, I will tell you. It is on the account of Major Galbraith. We made a treaty with the government and beg for what we do get, and can't get this till our children are dying with hunger. It is the traders who commenced it. Mr. A.J. Myrick told the Indians that they would get grass or dirt. Then Mr. Forbes told the lower Sioux that they were not men. Then Roberts was working with his friends to defraud us out of our moneys. If the young braves have pushed the white men, I have done this myself. So I want you to let Governor Ramsey know this. I have a great many prisoners, women, and children. I want you to give me an answer to the bearer." General Sibley's reply was, "Little Crow, you have murdered many of our people without any sufficient cause. Return me the prisoners under a flag of truce, and I will talk to you then like a man." Little Crow had no intention of returning the prisoners before the Long Trader gave some indication of whether he meant to carry out Governor Ramsey's dictum of extermination or exile for the Santees. On September 12th, Little Crow gave the Long Trader one last chance to end war without further bloodshed. On September 26th, with the assistance of Wabasha and Paul Mazzacootamane, who displayed truce flags, Sibley marched into the Santee camp and demanded immediate delivery of the captives. 107 whites and 162 half-breeds were released to the soldiers. In the Strawberry Moon, June 1863, Little Crow decided what he must do. If he and his family were forced to become Plains Indians, they must have horses. The white men who had driven him from his land had horses. He would take their horses in exchange for the land. He decided to return to Minnesota with a small party to capture horses. On the afternoon of July 3rd, Little Crow and Wawanapa, his 16-year-old son, left their hidden camping place and went to pick raspberries near the settlement of Hutchinson. While doing so, they were seen by two settlers returning home from a deer hunt. They knew that the state of Minnesota had recently begun paying $25 bounty for Sioux scalps. The settlers immediately opened fire. Little Crow was hit in the side just above the hip. This was the shot that killed him. His son carried on his story and later named a creek on the Missouri River Crow Creek. Crow Creek was also the site chosen for the Santee Reservation.